Today, we're having our Confident Conversations Toolkit webinar. I think it's going to be some good information. People are coming in, man, they are pouring in. It's exciting to have so many people signed up for a webinar and participating. It's such an exciting thing, exciting thing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started if you guys are all good with that. Um, it's called Confident Conversations Toolkit. For those of you who are familiar, we created what was called the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the shorter version of the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet, and then we'll talk about the Confident Conversations Toolkit that will go with it. If you have questions or anything like that, just raise your hand. I might not see you, so it could be that you have to go in and put something in chat. And then April, who is helping me with this, she will see you and she'll make sure that your question gets to me if it's something that I need to answer in front of everybody. Before we get started, this is all about how to be the guide sellers need. And the real key is here, even if they don't know it, because in most cases, they don't know that they need a guide, but they need one really in the worst way. Just real quickly, anytime you see this blue QR code pop up, it'll be on maybe a third of the slides throughout the presentation. That is a QR code that'll take you directly to a page where if you want to connect with me, you may want to connect with me, you may not want to connect with me. I do a radio show here in Atlanta. We have a podcast. You can watch my YouTube short videos, connect with me on Facebook. You can go take a look at my team and my business here in Metro Atlanta, which is Modern Traditions Realty Group. And if you want to, you can leave me a review. You can only leave me a review if it's a good review. Please don't leave one if it's a bad review. I want to go ahead and say that in advance, we're going to go fast. So I'm going to be covering some concepts that I'm going to slow down and I will cover them as thoroughly as I possibly can. But then I'm going to be showing you resources, all different types of resources and where to find them. And those of you who, by the way, are not Workman coaching clients, don't worry about you not having the resources. We'll give those to you. But those of you who are Workman clients, I want to make sure you know where to find those resources. And so if I'm going fast, it's because I'm not trying to teach you the resource. I'm just trying to teach you, here's what it looks like, here's where you find it, and all of that good stuff. So we're going to go fast because I've got at least 2 hours worth of content that I need to squeeze in an hour-long period. Here's what to expect on today's webinar. Again, fast pace. First of all, we'll review the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet, or what we call CLAW, the CLAW. Then we'll review the critical questions version of the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet. First one, 100 questions. Second one, 25 questions. Just to make it easier for people who have ADD like me, I can't get through 100 questions. I can barely do 25. So we wanted to shorten it for people whose attention span might not be 100 worthy. Then we're going to go into the Confident Conversations Toolkit. There are 9 different pieces 10 different pieces really, but 9 different educational pieces of the Confident Conversations Toolkit. I know what the problem is when it comes to selling a listing. Now, what on earth do I do about it? How do I communicate that? Because that's where we typically have problems. Then I'm going to hit real quickly some marketing opportunities. It's one thing to use what you're learning to influence your relationship with a seller, or to try to influence the seller to make the right decisions. But once you know how to find the solution for whatever problems a seller has trying to get a home sold in today's market, now you can use it from a marketing perspective. And that will take the knowledge that you have and it will literally supercharge it. It'll be like putting it on steroids, so that you can actually use it to attract people who understand that selling a home in today's market is a difficult situation and might want help. I'm going to offer you the opportunity to take some assignments. I'm going to double dog dare you to take some assignments if you're willing to do it. I think it'll be 4 things that will help you. We're going to have free resources for you. If you're on here today, there's nothing that I'm going to show you that you will not get a copy of via email when we're finished. I'm going to close by giving you a little special offer for a new program called Referral Champion. It is a training program based on the book Raving Referrals. It was written by Verl and one of his friends named Brandon. And I'll give you a special offer to participate in some coaching if you want to. It might be right for you. It might not be. And then in the end, I will stay on. I plan to go for almost a full hour covering content. If I'm done a few minutes early, don't worry about it. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I will not see them during the session because I don't even have a way to see them while I have my presentation up and running. But April will be monitoring all of your questions. We'll put them all together. And if I need to stay on for 5 or 10 minutes after, those who want to leave at the end leave, I'll stay on and I'll answer questions to make sure that every one of you gets what you need. And if you have questions that I don't have time to answer, I'll make sure that somebody shows me what those questions are and that I get them answered for you. Now, if you only pay attention to one concept and you don't pay attention to anything else in this presentation, I hope you do, but if you don't pay attention to anything else, I want you to pay attention to this first concept, because in many cases, it's the way we let our emotions affect us in negative ways that causes us to be limited in our ability to influence a seller. Let me say that one more time. It is my emotions about the situation that cause me to be limited in my ability to influence a seller in positive ways. I think if I asked every single person, if I could see everybody who was on here, and I think if I asked you very specifically what needs to be done in order to sell this particular listing, I'm quite confident that virtually all of you could tell me what needs to be done in order to get a listing sold. Meaning you know what to do. You know how to get it sold. You know what the price would need to be. You know that it's the dirty sock smell that's causing problems. You know that it's the neighbor's house. Whatever it is, you know what would need to be done in order to solve the problem. The problem is that we have to keep our emotions out of the way so that we can communicate with a seller, not against a seller. So when I am a listing agent on a property, my first inclination, because sometimes the 10-year-old Cleve from way back when is a little bit too emotional, a little too judgy, not very empathetic to the other side. And so in many cases, I look at it as I'm on one side of the equation, the seller is on the other side of the equation, and it's me against them. So I want you to pay attention, please, to this next slide, because that is not what's happening, first of all. And if you think that in any way, it is going to limit you in serious ways from having the ability to influence the seller in positive ways. And so what literally happens is we go from here's the listing agent on one side, the seller on the other side, and then we go to the listing agent and the seller on one side of the table and the entire world on the other side of the table. Now you say, well, what does he mean by the entire world? Well, I mean the real estate market that is influenced by things all over the world that we have no control over. So when we are having a discussion with the seller and we're giving them advice, we're not giving them advice from our perspective because we're sitting on the same side of the table they are. We're giving them our interpretation of what the world, the market, is telling us about their listing, about their pricing, about their condition, about all of those things. As I said before, if you only get one comment, if you only get one thought, one takeaway, put yourself in a position where instead of you being on one side of the table and the seller being on the other side of the table, you get on the same side of the table with the seller. And you and the seller figure out what the world is telling you you need to do in order to get that home sold. Because I'm telling you, when you do that, magic will happen. The seller's defenses will come down. Your resistance or your hesitation to having these very difficult conversations will also diminish as well. I'm not saying it'll go away because I still get nervous when I have conversations with sellers. I still feel like in many ways I'm a failure when I can't get the home sold. And I have to make sure and keep those emotions at bay. I have to keep those tucked down nice and neat so that I can communicate with the seller in a way that is empathetic to their situation and that is very sensitive to their needs. Hopefully all of you got what I'm saying there. I think this whole concept of understanding why listing's not selling and then being able to clearly communicate it, two steps in the same framework, if you will, I think it's important for us to understand that most sellers don't resist the truth. They are simply unaware of the truth, meaning if there are 10 listings available for sale in their market area, they think they're number one in terms of quality and location and pricing. And in many cases, they're not number one. They're number eight or number nine, or in some cases, they're number 10. And so what we have to do is we have to help them understand where their home ranks among the competition is very, very important. And let me remind you of this. Your job as an agent is not to push. It's to guide to clarity. So here's the cool thing that we all need to remember. It's not a cool thing, it's a frustrating thing, but once you understand it, it really helps the way you deal with your average home seller. And your job is to educate them the best you possibly can and to present them with the options they have for solving their problem. But remember, they always have one option that you may not like, and that option is to do nothing. And when you hear that, you might be saying, well, no, I know, but they got to make some changes because we got to get them going. We've got to get them moving in the right direction. But unless you give them a place of safety, which is you have the option of doing nothing, it's your home, you make the decisions, you don't have to do anything. That always needs to be one of the options that you give them. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we could reduce the price. We could make these changes to the property to improve the buyer's feelings about the condition of the property, or we could do nothing. The choice is yours. And it is that third choice of you can do nothing that is what puts them in a position where they feel safe, they feel secure, and they can now listen to what it is you have to say in the first place. I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with home sellers over the years when I first got into the real estate business. And literally, and I'm embarrassed to say this in front of people out loud, but I would blame them for not doing what I told them to do in order to sell their home. So I would say really, really smart things like, oh, remember when we priced the home in the first place, I suggested 375 and you're the one who wanted to price it at 4.25. And for some reason, I thought that would be helpful to say something like that to somebody. It was true, but all it did is create defensiveness in the seller. What I should have been saying all along was, my gosh, when you said you wanted 4.25, I put on my rose-colored glasses and I was seeing everything from your perspective, and you have no idea how badly I wanted that to be true. But listen to this, and here's how I switch it to me and them against the world. But what the market is telling us is that we may have missed the mark. Would it be okay if I walked you through all of the specifics about what I believe the market is telling me, because it might be saying the same thing to you? That's a very different conversation than, remember when I told you 375 and you said 425? You're the one who screwed this up. And I'm not saying any of you would do that, but if you're anything like me, your emotions are so strong that when you get a listing and it won't sell, it almost panics you. And so even if you have the ability as a good communicator to really communicate in an effective way, sometimes that ability goes away because our nerves just get the best of us. Now remember, sometimes after seeing how their home ranks against the competition, sellers may choose to get off the market. And most agents I know look at that as that is a loss. That is not a loss. That is still a win, because at least it means they trusted your guidance. Now, if they go off the market and go right back on with somebody else at the same price, maybe that's not the case. But in most cases, when you guide them with empathy, full understanding of their situation, and you continue to educate them with all of the amazing market knowledge that you and only you have, because if you're on this session today, I already know you're more committed to doing the right things by the seller than other people are, because in many cases, agents are just stuck doing the same thing. If you lose them, it's still a win because it means they trusted your advice. I talk to agents all the time. And when I'm talking to agents, and I talk to team leaders, and I talk to team members, and I talk to agents in cities that sales price is 350,000 on average. I talk to agents who are in cities where their sales price is 3.2 million. I talk to people in Florida. I talk to people in Virginia. I talk to people in 50,000 population cities. I talk to people in 8,000 population cities or 10,000, I mean, excuse me, 650,000 population versus 8 or 10 million population. And the markets are all different. But here's the same feedback I get from everybody in any market when they're having trouble selling. The listing agents are frustrated because seems like their income is drying up. They have anxiety because they have kids in college or they have some expenses coming up and they need to make sure they have the money. They're in some ways embarrassed. They've put their sign in the front yard of somebody's listing and all the neighbors are driving by, and in their opinion, the neighbors might even be laughing at them because so and so from so and so brokerage doesn't know how to get this home sold. In many cases, they talk to me in a way that makes it seem like they almost resent the seller and they resent this particular situation. And that makes sense. In some cases, they just get burned out and they say, I don't have anything left in me. I got nothing in the tank to do this. This is too negative. I don't like it. And here's the biggest kicker for me, and this is the one that always gets me. It hits me right in the heart when somebody says, I don't think I can do it. Because that's the kiss of death. They lose confidence. And I want you to see the list of emotions that a seller experiences. And I want you to notice how different they are than the emotions experienced by a listing agent. Did you notice they're exactly the same? Home sellers will get frustrated because, hey, I've got to be in Utah ready to start my new job at the end of September, and I'm frustrated because I'm not going to be able to be there. I have anxiety because my home has, as a seller, has been listed twice as long as I thought it would be listed, which means my family is being inconvenienced twice as long, and that causes me anxiety because, having someone at home that's doing showings and maybe having kids, it causes anxiety for me to deal with all of that stuff. It causes me to be embarrassed because my next door neighbor who sold their house really, really fast came to my house and then came back 45 days later and it was still listed and wanted to know what the problem is with my home. I started to resent the process. I started to resent having to move to Utah. I started to resent the market and resent the buyers and resent having to do things. I started to get burned out as a seller. I just am like, I don't have anything left in the tank to give. And then again, the kiss of death here is sometimes sellers start to lose confidence in the process. They lose confidence in their ability to get their home sold. So I want to start you here with one really important message. This is Cindy West. She's in Ellijay, Georgia, which is in the North Georgia mountains, an absolutely gorgeous area. A lot of people don't think of Georgia as having mountains, but the Appalachian Mountain chain starts on the west side of Georgia and goes kind of diagonally northeast across Georgia. She's done over $1 million worth of gross commission income herself personally in 22, 23, and 24. She happened to be a personal coaching client of Tammy Slay. Most of you who know me and know Tammy, you know that Tammy is my fiance. We'll be married in April. And so she and I have a lot of conversations about coaching clients. And Cindy said something to her that literally, when Tammy told me, this was very early in the process, and she wasn't telling me information she didn't need to tell. She was telling me something that was so impactful, that was so influential. She said that Cindy said to her that most agents measure their success in the number of calls, appointments set, and closings. And she went on to say something that just literally stopped me in my tracks. And that is, I measure, or she measures her success every day by the number of uncomfortable conversations that she has. Most of us are not comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. But the reality is that those people in the world that we're the closest connected to are the ones we've been in the mud together with. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about whether or not what I'm saying is true. I feel closer to people when I know the real them and they know the real me. And the reality is having uncomfortable conversations and getting in the mud with people about listings can really, in many cases, strengthen that relationship, especially if you get in the mud with them and don't have any expectations of what they need to do. You're just in there with them. You're going to try to help them get out of it. Now, I talk to agents quite often, and they're always giving me the reasons that the home won't sell. They're saying it's the price. It's the condition of the home. It's not nice enough for the money. It's the fact that we have a lack of showings, or maybe we have lots of interest online, but when people come to the home, they don't want to go in the home, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's pets and maybe they cause inconvenience. As you can see, we've got a picture of Rover over here, and I love the picture because Rover seems like he's ashamed of something that he's done, and I love pets, and so I don't think pets ever cause problems, but sometimes buyers don't love the pets as much as the sellers do. Sometimes there's just too much clutter. Sometimes they think you shouldn't have 400 different face lotions and things on the bathroom countertop, that it should be clean and look like it's something where they could move into the house and they could use it. And sometimes it's just simply smells. I can remember going and looking at houses and literally I'm like, there is a pair of dirty socks somewhere. And I didn't want to look around to find them. I wanted to get out of there. And so did my client. And so all of these things lead to a lack of buyer demand. So the reason we can't get a home sold is because we don't have adequate buyer demand. Price can affect buyer demand. Condition, lack showings can affect buyer demand. Pets, clutter, smells, all that stuff can affect buyer demand. Sometimes on the front end, before the buyer decides to come see the home, and sometimes on the back end, which is when they drive up in front of the home and sometimes refuse to come in, or they come into the home and they're in and out in literally 3 minutes flat. All of these things are part of a lack of buyer demand. And let me show you real quickly as we get started into these resources. Those of you who are Workman coaching clients, you'll log into Workbench. You'll click on the resource library on the left-hand toolbar. Then you'll click on the listing turnaround framework. All of the documents I showed you today are in the listing turnaround framework folder. We created a 10-section comprehensive listing audit worksheet, which is the detailed version. You have 10 different pages. You have 10 questions on each of the 10 pages, so that's 100 questions. For those of you who are trying to create your own unique formula for, look, this is what I do, this is the process I follow to get listings sold, I would encourage you to review every single question on each one of these pages so that you can determine, hey, here's the 12 or the 15 or the 20 or the 30 items that I want to use in your proprietary system, the system that is unique to you. But what we did, and again, it's for people who have the attention span like me, who I can't get through, even though I wrote the questions, I can't get through 100 questions to deal with a typical seller. So I needed a shorter version to do that. So we created what is called the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet Critical Questions version. It has 5 sections, has a total of 25 questions, so it's a quarter as long. We go into pricing and market position, conditioning and presentation, market visibility and media, buyer behavior and feedback, and seller and agent engagement. And then we use the answers we give on a rating of 1 to 3 or 0 to 3. We use the answers we give to come up with a scoring that actually helps us determine where our priorities are. So let's take a look at the Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet, the Critical Questions version. Again, resource library in Workbench, listing turnaround framework in Comprehensive Listing Audit Worksheet. That's where you find these. But these questions are very impactful, and I'll just cover a couple of them. In our pricing and market position, one of the questions is, has the seller toured or virtually reviewed all comparable listings? And in most cases, that answer is no, and that causes a lot of problems. And we look at the condition and presentation section. Are there any odors or visual turnoffs that need to be addressed, including any evidence of pets? Whatever it might be. In many cases, the seller is not in touch with reality with how their list stacks up against the competition. In the next section is market visibility and media. Are all photos professionally taken, well lit, and presented in a logical order? When you offer a picture of the front yard, then a picture of the foyer, then a picture of the backyard, then a picture of the primary bedroom's water closet, then a picture of the family room, and you're all thinking nobody does that anymore. Oh, yes, they do. You go on Zillow and you look at some listings and you see what order some of those photos are in, and they don't make any sense. And if somebody's not getting what they feel like is a logical flow through the home, in many cases, they're out, they're gone. Then for buyer behavior and feedback, here's a very important question: is actionable feedback collected and communicated to the seller after each showing? There's a whole argument on one side or the other about whether or not we should be providing showing feedback. Some people do, some people don't. Some people say, hey, it's causing problems. Whatever you think is absolutely okay. But when you're representing a seller, in my opinion, you want that feedback and it needs to be actionable. So when somebody chooses not to buy it and they say the price is fine, they're not giving you any actionable feedback. Because if the price was dropped $100,000, they might very well be buying your home instead of another home. So when you have conversations with agents, do your best to get them to give you feedback that you can use to take to the seller, that the seller can use to take action on. So for example, home listed at $849,000. Buyer's agent says, we're going to go buy another home. Listing agent, in this case, who's me, says, okay, tell me exactly what it would take in order to get your buyers to buy this home. It would have to be $810,000 because the other one is $815,000. That is very actionable feedback. I'm not saying the seller should do that, but I'm saying that's very actionable feedback. And then the last section is seller and agent alignment. And here's a doozy. Is the home easy to show with little or no notice? And is there flexible access? I was working with a seller who, I'm embarrassed to say this, it took us 9 months to sell her home. I told her in the first place, and I would not say this to her, that it was worth this amount. She wanted to get $90,000 more. This person's a friend of mine forever and ever and ever. And for literally 7.5 months, I talked to her about reducing the price and the things she needed to do in order to get the home sold. Nope, 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 nope. Those were always her answer until she got within 45 days of her son graduating from high school and her having no need to be in the high school district anymore. Within that 45-day period, we had 3 price reductions, had the home under contract, and then sold it literally 60 days from the time she got motivated. And so she used to refuse showings. She wanted to sell her home so bad, but no, we've got this and we've got that, and she wouldn't let people in the home, and it wound up being a big deal. So all of these questions are very important, and I'll talk to you a little bit later about how you can use these tools to actually market and attract more customers along the way. The reasons that we as agents, or the reason I, in many cases, have avoided hard conversations, and sometimes I still do it today, I don't mean to, but sometimes I do, is number one, there's just a fear in us that will damage the relationship. We're not absolutely 100% sure that we have everything the seller needs anyway. And I know I'm just projecting here. You may or may not feel that way, but the reality is that when I start talking about how we've done things that are wrong, I'm worried about damaging that relationship. Sometimes I just have a lack of confidence in here. The information I'm seeing, is it actually what I need to be communicating? And is what I'm seeing correct? And then I can't tell you how many times in my career, and I don't do it very often anymore, that I literally just hope and pray that time will solve the problem. Hey, the right buyer is going to come sometime in the next couple of months. And the truth is if what's happening today is not helping you get that listing sold, the odds of it improving anytime soon are very, very slim. And so I want you to remember these words. Hey, Mr. Seller, I need to tell you something today that might be very difficult. And the reason I want difficult to hear, and the reason I want to tell you today is because I don't want to tell you 60 days from now and have the seller have you ask me why I didn't tell you this earlier. Hoping and praying that time will solve the problem is not going to do any good for anybody. I want to remind you, if you have any questions that you want answered, I'm not going to be answering them during the presentation. At the end, though, I'll be happy to stay on and answer any questions. So if you have them, just stick them in the chat, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer all of them, even if I have to stay on an extra 5 or 10 minutes. The real truth for many of us is that we avoid having difficult conversations because we just don't want to be wrong. Well, let me give all of you a little bit of insider information. In many cases, as humans, we are as often wrong as we are right. We're imperfect. We're guessing. We're trying to do the best we can. And remember that in many cases, what we need as a real estate professional sometimes clouds the advice that we need to give others. And so it's very possible for us to be wrong, but that is not any reason that should hold us back from giving people everything we believe they should know. Whether or not they choose to follow the advice, totally up to them. Now, we've been through the comprehensive listing audit worksheet just quickly. We went through the critical questions version of that just quickly. Those things will help you know without a shadow of a doubt what needs to be done to solve the problem and to sell that listing. But now here's the problem. Now, how do you talk about it? Well, that's what the Confident Conversations Toolkit is going to solve. Remember, when you see the QR code in the lower right-hand corner, if you want to connect with me, just go there. It'll take you where you can connect with me however you want to. If you want to, fantastic. If you don't, I certainly understand as well. This is an example just to get us started, and I know I'm covering a lot real fast, but remember I told you early on, buckle up. We're going to cover a ton of stuff. My guess is that we will be sending a full recording of this out for everybody who participates on this today so you can catch up on anything that you might have missed. The situation is this. You've got a listing, it's clean, it's well marketed, but the buyer feedback is showing that buyers are choosing other homes over this one. You've had 4 showings and 2 of the buyers have bought another home in a similar area. So in my opinion, the weak section of the comprehensive listing audit worksheet is the pricing and market position. And what needs to happen is I need to have a strategy and alignment meeting, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And we need to talk about options for increasing demand. Meaning, what are my options for increasing demand online? What are my options for increasing demand in terms of the number of people that come through and see the home? The Confident Conversations Toolkit has 10 different pieces. The first piece analyzes the psychology of a seller. The next piece goes into what is a pivotal conversation. The third piece is when is the appropriate timing for these pivotal conversations. The fourth piece is how do you launch one? How do you start one? The fifth piece is the seller disc decoder. How do I understand how I need to contour what I say to the personality of the seller? I'm a high D. So you would talk to me very differently than you would talk to a high I or a high S or a high C. The next piece, or the sixth piece, is sharing without triggering. In other words, how do I start the conversation without getting the seller to be defensive, causing the seller to be defensive? Then we go into a strategy alignment meeting. Here's the 5 things we do when we are having a meeting with them about aligning our strategy. We're going to talk a little bit about role playing. I know most of you, when you hear role playing, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to role play. If we're going to get good, we got to practice, and that's all there is to it. We've created confidence cards, which are literally like role play cards. It's all on a piece of paper, so you'd have to make the cards yourselves. But we've created scripts of seller objections and then some of the emotionally intelligent responses. As we jump into the psychology of a seller, and I know I'm going really fast here. Hopefully you're all able to get what you need out of it. Sellers often feel disappointed, embarrassed, defensive, afraid to lose money, all those emotions that we talked about before. And your job is simple. It's not to get them to do what you think they need to do. It's to cut through the emotional fog with calm clarity. So as we get into the psychology of a seller, it's important for us to remember they're not being difficult. They're being human. They're imperfect. They don't have the ability to make the right decisions all the time. I had an agent say to me not too long ago, my client won't change the price even though the market data is crystal clear. And when that agent said that, my question to the agent was, crystal clear to who? And when I said crystal clear to who or crystal clear to whom, the agent said, oh, to me. And I said, well, I don't see how it being crystal clear to you actually helps the seller. Because I told this agent, the seller has emotional baggage. They raised kids in the home. They got married in the home. They had all kinds of life experiences in the home. They love the home. It's a better home than anybody else's home because they have this emotional baggage. I reminded that any resistance that this agent was feeling is really disorientation on the part of the seller. And when somebody has emotional baggage, they cannot have unclouded judgment. The emotional baggage always clouds people's judgments. And it's going to come out in the forms of stories and objections and avoidance, meaning I don't want to do that for this reason, or I don't need to sell my house, or we don't have to sell, or whatever the objection is and whatever they're trying to avoid. As we continue with that seller psychology, another agent said, why does my client think I'm the enemy instead of their advocate? And it's because the seller has an emotional bias. The seller is running everything that's happening in that particular time with that particular listing through their own filter of all of the emotional things that they experienced over the years. The seller also has anchoring issues, meaning when we started out, we were going to list the home at 530,000, we were going to sell it at 520,000. I was going to walk away with 490,000. So I'm anchoring my decision today in what I thought was going to happen in the past. And in many cases, sellers are just as guilty as hoping and praying that time will solve the problem, which is that hopeful delay. When you're having pivotal conversations, it's important to seize the opportunity to have that pivotal conversation. I'm going to give you 8 different time frames during the listing when it makes sense for you to do that in one of the resources. But an agent said to me, I keep waiting for my seller to bring it up, and now they're already upset. And as those words came out of that agent's mouth, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, if he is waiting on the seller to bring it up, he is going to be sadly, sadly frustrated. When we wait on people to do things, we typically wait too long to have the conversations that we should have today. We're missing the opportunities to create shifts in thinking at various timing trigger points. After our first weekend of showings, after we've had 10 showings and no offer, after we find a buyer who went and bought another property. You'll see the list of those things in just a minute, but it's important for us to have these pivotal conversations at the right time, to have them at the inflection points, and it's mandatory that we not miss the moment. Now, the resource that is here for pivotal conversations, what is one? Why does it matter? The agent mind shift. This is just an example of what you'll find in your resources and what you're going to get a link to when we email you after the session today. Now, the timetable, and this is the step 3 of the process. So it is seller psychology, it is pivotal conversations, it is the pivotal conversations timetable. And we go through 8 different times within the listing that you need to have an important conversation. We review why it matters. We review what the focus is of the conversation. In other words, how to get it started, what you're trying to do. And then we give you an opening example, an opening line example. And the time frames are before the listing goes live, after the first weekend of showings, when showing activity drops off, after 10 days without serious interest, after critical negative feedback is received from a buyer or an agent, when a competing listing sells, or when a buyer buys a competing listing, after a major market shift, something that's happened, interest rates up, interest rates down, and certainly after the seller rejects a reasonable offer. It's very important to know that these are the time frames. Boom, it's time to go with that conversation. It's time to go right now. As we look into how we launch these difficult conversations with confidence, it's important that we step into the role of a guide and a trusted guide. And this is done through the questions that we ask. And 3 simple examples that I'll give you today are, number 1, would it be okay if I just shared something that might help us decide what's next? It's a very non-threatening way to do that. The second option, can I walk you through something I'm seeing in the feedback? Can I tell you what the feedback is saying to me? Because in many cases, what it's saying to me as the agent is not what the seller is perceiving at all. And then number 3, do you want to see how your home compares to what buyers are choosing? These are the 2 that have sold. These are what they were listed for. Let's take a look at those prices and the inside photos so you can get a good experience. So as we launch difficult conversations with confidence, we go through the real reason we avoid it, the power of permission-based phrasing, the tone and framing to create the openness, your role as a seller's guide, how to interact with them as often as possible. One of the things that I used to do is I'd let things build up for 2 or 3 weeks and then have a conversation with somebody, and it simply does not work. And then we give you those prompts to get the conversations started. So moving to the next step, and I know I'm going so fast, I hope you guys still have your seatbelt on and you're able to follow through with me here. But we have to match our messaging and phrasing to the seller's personality types. And you may be familiar with the DISC personality profile, or you may not be. But a high D is someone who's direct and results oriented. A high I is optimistic. They don't like to, they want to avoid shame. They don't like shame. They don't want to make bad decisions. A high S is someone who's gentle and consistent, and high C is someone who's detailed and logical. And you can see from these that talking to a D as if they were a C will cause real problems. Talking to an I as if they were an S, or an S as if they were an I, will cause problems. So what we've done is put together a resource. In the first 2 pages, this is basically the seller disc personality decoder, and we give you 6 different questions. You don't need all 6 of them. You need 1 or 2 of them that you use standard. And based on the way and how the answers you hear, you can determine what type of personality the seller has. So those are the first 2 pages, 6 different examples, 4 different options for answers under each one of them. We might turn you into a seller disc profile genius if you'll just use 1 or more of those questions and listen carefully to the answers to determine the personality type. Then we go in and give you an interpretation guide on what each one of those personality profiles means. Then we tell you how to respond to each one of these personality types in a difficult conversations, for D's, for I's, for S's, and for C's. We basically give you everything you need to make sure that your communication is perfectly customized for the personality of the seller. Now, as we get started having these conversations, you have to have phrases that lower defensiveness on the part of the seller. And if you think all the way back to the initial slide where I showed listing agent on one side, seller on the other, and then I had listing agent and seller on the same side with the world on the other, these are examples of how you're helping the seller understand we're in this together. It's the world that's causing our problems. And so some examples, and this was a quote from an agent. I know I need to say something, but I don't want to upset them or lose the listing. And in many cases, that's the first step in losing the listing, is saying I don't want to upset them or lose the listing. And some examples here, let's look at how buyers are responding across the market. This isn't about fault, it's about alignment. And it's not rejection, it's information we can use. It is rejection. The buyers are rejecting them, but the market is giving you information you can use to help the seller in that situation. Next, we move into the step of the strategy alignment meeting framework. There are 5 pieces. You'll have a training document that teaches you the details of all these pieces, including an outline of exactly the agenda for the meeting. But it works very simply. First, you'll start with connection, and we talk about how to do that. Then you'll revisit their original goals, confirm what we said we were going to do from the beginning. You'll share the current situation or the current story. Then you'll offer 2 to 3 options, which is 1, you can do this, 2, you can do that, or 3, you can do nothing. It always follows the same format. And then you can sit down and decide together exactly what you will do. Here's what the resource looks like for how to confidently lead a strategy alignment meeting: what it is, when to schedule it, what resources you need to bring to the table, the 5-step meeting agenda, and the phrases that signal leadership. For example, I've walked other sellers through this before, and there is a clear path forward. If you want me to show it to you, I'll be happy to. Don't know how many of you, and this is amazing to me when you think about it, but I'm sure most of you remember Michael Phelps. In the 2008 Beijing Olympics, he won 8 gold medals. Now, he's not the only person in history to do that, but my buddy Reed Martin reminded me, who Reed Martin was an Olympic skier as well, if I remember correctly, which is amazing. What an exciting thing. And Reed reminded me of the amount of time that Michael Phelps had to spend practicing compared to the amount of time he spent in the water. It's estimated that he spent between 21,000 and 25,000 hours practicing over a 12-year period, and he won all 8 of his gold medals in the water for 7 minutes and 52 seconds. Now, I want you to think about that. He spent 2,669 hours of practice for every single minute in the water. Almost 2,700 hours for every minute he spent in the water. And I think in many cases, we go into a situation where we're having a conversation with a seller and we literally haven't practiced at all. We haven't walked through the objections they might give us. We haven't walked through the solutions we have for those objections. We haven't been investing the time in practicing. And I know when I say role play, a lot of you go, oh my gosh, anything but role play. But if Michael Phelps spent 2,669 hours practicing for every minute he spent in the water to become the world's best swimmer at that time, certainly the most medaled swimmer at that time, then all of us can spend a little bit more time practicing the scripts before we get in front of a seller or a buyer that we need to influence in a positive way. This is what the resource for role-playing conversations, it just gives you an outline of what you need to do, why it works, what you need to practice, role-playing the different scenarios, practice like it's the real thing, practice like you're in a game. And then for brokers and team leaders, it gives you tips for leading a role play session. Now, the cool thing is we added to, here's how you role play, we added what we call confidence cards. No, they're not actually in cards. They're on 5 different pieces of paper. There's 20 questions. 20 seller objections, and then the emotionally intelligent confident responses that go with each. And it's really all designed to build your muscle memory. So if we take a look at the first page, here's an example objection from the seller. This is card number 2. Let's give it another couple weeks and see what happens. And that confident agent response is, we can absolutely do that, but may I show you what tends to happen with homes that wait longer to adjust in this market? Because you can certainly show them when sellers have 1 price decrease or 2 price decrease, how low the price gets as a percentage of the original list price, and that's very powerful. Here's page 2. Seller says, oh, no big deal. I'm at number 8. It only takes 1 buyer. We're just waiting for that 1 person. And in many cases, an agent might go, okay, makes sense to me. Let's keep waiting until we find the right person. But the good, smart agent responds, the one who's competent and who's practiced hours and hours and hours, says that's true. And that's also a little bit risky. The homes attracting that 1 buyer are usually the ones that align with their expectations up front. Can I show you what those expectations look like? We got the 3rd page. I'm going to number 12. I don't want to give it away. We've put too much into this house. Agent, I hear that, and I'm never recommending giving away a house. My job is to help you get the best return you can in today's market. It's not the market we hope for, and the choice of whether to stay in your home for an extended period is totally yours, or if you want to. Unfortunately, the price and terms of sale require agreement between you and a ready, willing, and able buyer, and it's a very polite way to say that you don't get to make all the decisions as a seller when you're selling your home, because the buyers are the ones who ultimately determine the price. Another example of a card, you said the price was right a month ago. Based on the data we had back then, the agent says, I believed it was. Since then, the market has shifted, and I'd rather update our strategy now than hold on to an outdated one. Seems pretty powerful to me. And then the last question, the last objection, if we drop the price, won't we look desperate? That's a common fear, the agent would say, and a fair one. But in today's market, strategic adjustments are seen as responsive, not desperate. Want to review a few listings that made the smart adjustment and got sold. Those are all very powerful. We've been through all 10 of the sections of the Confident Conversations Toolkit. I know I've done it very, very quickly, and hopefully I haven't lost you in the dust. And if I have, make sure you put a question in. I'll try to answer it at the end of the session, and you'll get copies of the resources and a copy of the video of the webinar and everything when it's all finished. Remember, as an ethical reminder, your job is to clarify, not convince. When a seller decides to pause or withdraw that offer after clear conversations, that's leadership on your part. Now, this is a real estate agent. I've named him Joe. I don't know who Joe is. I wish Joe the most success, and I hope he has lots of opportunity for income. But in many cases, the average agent out there makes it really easy for us to be able to compete with them. Now, I want you to think about what I just said for a second. The average agent makes it very easy for us to be able to compete with them, because think about this. Joe doesn't know about the comprehensive listing audit worksheet, about the critical questions version, and about the Confident Conversations toolkit. So he's still doing business the old way while you're doing business the new way. Now, I want to shift gears for just a second, and I want to get into a little bit of the marketing opportunities that I think are so important. Most of you have probably heard of a SWOT analysis, where you have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The 2 squares to the left are internal to you. The 2 squares to the right are external. If we want to focus on the most important piece of the SWOT analysis in terms of marketing, it's the lower right-hand quadrant. It is the threats. So if I said to you, do you think your average potential home buyer in the United States understands today that interest rates are a threat? I think most of you would say, yeah, I think they do. And when they understand a threat and you as an agent understand a threat, then when you message to the market, make a post of, hey, friends, at what interest rate would you be willing to buy a house in today's market? Many have told me rates are too high. I'm wondering what the right rate is for you. They will see themselves in the message. So we connect with people on commonly understood threats. My follow-up question for you is very simple. Do you think that the average person who is thinking about selling a home or is currently selling a home has at least heard rumblings about the real estate market being a more difficult market? Northeast US, Midwest, part of Canada is rocking and rolling, but there's a lot of areas in the US and Canada that are very, very soft, and sellers recognize that as a particular problem. So if you have your home listed and you're frustrated, if you're thinking about listing your home and you're worried about making sure you do all the right things, now listen to this from a marketing perspective. You have a critical questions comprehensive listing audit worksheet that you can walk through with a potential seller to help them understand whether or not their plan is right, whether or not their familiarity with the market is adequate for them to make all of the right decisions as they move forward. So you can use those threats to connect with people on expired listings. Can you imagine how frustrated sellers would be when their listing expires in today's market? It's certainly you can't prospect expired listings everywhere, but in many areas in the US, you can absolutely 100% do that. And what if you offered them the framework for free? Where were they missing the mark when it comes to getting their home sold? And you can use the comprehensive listing audit worksheet to do that. You can do the same thing for for sale by owners. You could do the same thing for for rent by owners who are frustrated that the last 3 tenants they've had have been really inadequate, unacceptable tenants, and now they'd rather sell the house. You can talk to people in your sphere, because if they're not looking to buy or sell, they might know somebody who's looking to buy or sell. And the people they know who are looking to buy or sell might have a fear that is similar to yours, that is understood in the market. You can market it on social media. I was working with an agent in the Charlotte market, and I said, why don't you just go on your social media page and on Facebook specifically, and why don't you post on there that if you were to make an improvement to your home, exactly what improvement would you make? If you were to sell your home, what would help you make the determination as to whether or not you wanted to do that? We can take these commonly understood threats and we can market to them so that the people who read our posts see themselves in the message. And remember, we can do postcards and mailing, and this is called threat elimination system marketing. It's what the shift system modules, our coaching clients will understand what a shift module is, or a shift system, and it's what they're designed to solve for, is for the threats. I've got some assignments for those of you who are willing to take them. I'll double dog dare you to do these. And the first one is to identify 3 avoided conversations. List 3 sellers you've been avoiding conversations with and why, and then commit to having 1 conversation in the next 72 hours. Might go great, it might go poorly, it doesn't matter. The key is that you have one of those conversations and try to move the business forward. Step number 2 in your assignments, and remember, I double dog dare you, is to draft your opening line. You'll have all of the resources you need in the Confident Conversation Toolkit to draft that opening line. How do you open that conversation and say, I want to talk to you about something that might not be very pleasant for you to hear, but I feel like I need to tell you now instead of apologize later for not telling you? How do you open that conversation with somebody? So you write and practice that first sentence, and you use it to start your pivotal conversations with a seller. Then you conduct a strategy alignment session. Remember, you have the strategy alignment session agenda, you have the purpose, you have what to bring, you have it all in the Confident Conversations Toolkit. You gather your updated comps and photos and walk a seller through the marketing using a data first approach. It's not what you're telling them, it's what you believe the market is saying to them. And remember, one of those puts you on opposite sides of the fence, the other one puts you on the same side of the fence against the world. And the last piece of the puzzle for those of you who are willing to take the assignment, that is to do a 7-day conversation challenge. Have one conversation per day for 7 days using the toolkit principles. Track what works and where you feel resistance. Remember what Cindy West said to Tammy Slay, and I believe their very first original coaching call, something that stopped me in my tracks and still affects me in big ways today. She measures her success by the number of uncomfortable conversations she has every day. And in many cases, I can do the opposite of that. So remember Cindy West when you move forward with these 4 assignments. The truth is that these concepts work, and they work in big ways. These are things that agents have said to me over the last 60 days. Number one, had a stale listing for 90 days, sold it in 2 weeks after using this because they were able to get the price down or the condition improved. Price changes used to be awkward. Now sellers thank me for them. So I used to be scared to death of having a price conversation. Now when I'm finished, the sellers say, thank you so much for being honest and open with me. Because when you give the seller the opportunity to do nothing, to not follow your advice, they're much more willing to be open-minded and listen. And then another agent said 3 listings sold last month using this framework. And this was an agent who had not closed any listings in 4 months. This was an agent who was genuinely scared that they would not have enough money to even be able to afford to support the listing until they could get it sold. And in my opinion, when a framework like this makes that much difference, it is a big deal. You don't have to do anything at all to request these resources. Because you've been here, you'll get an email sometime later today. You'll get the Confident Conversations Toolkit, the Critical Questions Audit Worksheet, and then the full comprehensive listing audit worksheet, and you don't have to do anything at all in order to receive those. Now, I told you in the very beginning that I would give you a special offer for a program called Referral Champion. This Referral Champion program, I have to tell you that I'm biased in whether or not I think you should participate. It's because my fiance, Tammy Slay, who in my opinion is the best in the United States in terms of producing referral business, is doing the training. Now, what this is, it's a designation so you can become referral champion designated in the real estate industry. And what it's not is it's not about doing listing presentations. It's really only about how to ask for referrals. It's not about buyer presentations. It's really only about how to generate 86 referrals per year. It's not about hosting open houses. It's about how to create real loyalty. It's not about listing workflows. It's really only about how to neo-hack your sphere so that you can get them to give you more referral business. And it's not about business development. It's really only about relationship development. No fluff, no filler, only referrals. If you're wondering, is this right for me? And a lot of you are team members, and sometimes you don't invest a lot of money in yourself. You expect the team to do it. The investment, I believe, is $297 a month. There's no contract for it. But if you ask yourself, did I generate 86 referrals last year? And if that answer is no, then I would say that this program is right for you. Enrollment is open now for the only round of sessions that will be personally taught by Tammy Slay. Others might have a different instructor in the future, or they might have to go through an online pre-recorded webinar version. If you want to join, just scan the QR code, go to the page, lock in your spot. You'll get your one-on-one strategy referral strategy session with Tammy Slay to determine whether or not it's right for you. And you can build a predictable referral-based or referral-driven business. If you need help, if you're seeing all these tools, I am a person who needs a system for doing everything. I told you earlier that I try to keep the 10-year-old Cleve from showing up. I don't want him to get in the driver's seat. And if I leave myself to my own emotions, then I tend to get a little bit overwhelmed by emotions and I don't do the right things. I don't follow the system. And so if you need help with anything that we talked about today, or you need overall coaching help for your business, I have many times in my professional career had 2 or 3 coaches helping with me with things, sometimes to the tune of $100,000 a year. I'm not saying you should do that, but what I'm saying is if you need help, just go to the chat, type in the word me, ME is all you got to say, and I will have somebody reach out to you and answer your specific questions and help you with pretty much anything you need. Now, thank you so much for being here. In my opinion, you're already the kind of agent the sellers need. And if you'll drop your questions in the chat or stay after for the live Q&A, I'll be happy to stay on for a little bit and answer questions. And if you want to contact me, just know that there's the QR code for you to be able to do that. April, I'm going to unshare, and I don't know if you can jump on and we can answer some questions for whoever wants to stay on. Those of you who have gotten everything you need, good to see you. We'll see you sometime soon, and good luck getting your listing sold.
Awesome. Thank you, Cleve. That was really good information.
You
A
are so
lot.
welcome.
Yep.
It was too much, but thank you so much.
Loved it. We had one question in the chat. I don't know if Linda is still with us, but she did ask, how do we rank a listing with comps?
So the ranking of the listing can only be done after the seller has experienced those listings. And so really they can only rank the listing after they go see their active competition. And literally when you go see the first one, then you ask them to rank their home as better or worse than the first one. And then you do the same thing with the second one, the same thing with the third one, the same thing with the fourth one. And then that puts you in a position where the seller's like, oh, I thought my home was first, but it's number 4. So that's how you get them to rank them.
Great. The other questions we had were mostly ones that you answered already. Yes, we will be sending out a recording of this as soon as it is edited, hopefully within the next day or two. And then, of course, everyone who was in attendance on today's session will receive an email with all of the resources that Cleve brought up today. So you had a lot of people wanting to know how to get those. And then you talked about role play for a little bit and wanted to remind that anyone that is on this call that is a Workman client does have access to Workman AI role play as well.
Absolutely. And you've got a role play session every Thursday, I forget, 10 a.m. Mountain, noon Eastern time. And those role play sessions are great, and they always go through a particular shift module. So if you're on and you have any questions, I'll stay on for just a few more minutes. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't care how difficult. I don't care. And by the way, if you think a question is a stupid question, sometimes those are the best ones you can possibly ask, because you're not the only one who has the question. So I'll wait just another minute or two. If I see any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And if not, we will sign off. The information about the role play class,
Yeah,
yes. Can we post the link,
yeah,
April?
I will put it in chat right now. And yeah, we're happy to see anybody there who wants to go. It's absolutely free and it's every Thursday.
And Betty says, you said that we can talk to Tammy first. That's exactly right. You go fill out what you need to fill out, and Tammy will have a one-on-one strategy session with you. She wants to make sure that the program is right for you, and I know you want to make sure that it's right for you. And so you guys will both be on the same page. Any other questions? All right, good. It seems like we've gotten everybody taken care of. Thanks, all of you. We've still got a ton of people on, even though we're 4 minutes late in the call. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And all I want to say as we get finished is I hope you have lots of success and you learn things in today's market that will put your business on fire as the business starts to improve. And then I don't know if Jordan is on, but if Jordan's on, there you go. Jordan just posted the link to Tammy's referral class. So if you want to go take a look at it, go take a look at it. Thank you so much for being here today. We'll see all of you soon. And don't forget, this is not the last of the resources we'll be handing out. We've got more to come. Stick with us.